I see many people today blaming all of society's problems on capitalism. However, Peter Drucker would likely say that they are fighting a ghost. Blaming traditional capitalism for today's problems is fundamentally a misunderstanding of what era we are actually living in. According to Drucker, we are no longer living in a purely capitalist society. We have already moved into a post-capitalist society. The current understanding of capitalism and the image of wealthy, cigar-smoking capitalist pigs owning all of the factories and exploiting the powerless working class is completely outdated. The traditional capitalists actually reached the peak of power way back around World War I. Today, these old-school capitalists have pretty much ceased to exist. So if traditional capitalism isn't to blame for our current economic turbulence, what is? Drucker points to three actual culprits that define our modern dysfunction. 1. Capitalism without capitalists, an accountability void. The people who actually own the means of production today aren't the wealthy elite. They are the everyday workers. Through pension funds, mutual funds, and retirement accounts, the employees of developed countries own the vast majority of share in large businesses. Drucker calls this pension fund capitalism, which is essentially capitalism without capitalists. The money driving the economy is actually the savings of the working class. The problem is not that capital is exploiting labor. The problem is an accountability void. These massive funds are run by faceless, salaried investment analysts who act as short-term speculators rather than responsible owners. In the 1970s and the 1980s, this dynamic fueled a frantic era of hostile takeovers, leveraged buyouts, and financial manipulation. To satisfy these institutional investors, management redefined its entire purpose to maximizing shareholder value. Drucker forcibly argues that this was disastrous. Managing a business exclusively for the shortest-term stock price damages the long-term wealth-producing capacity, and it alienates the knowledge workers the business relies on. The real issue here isn't the existence of capital. It's that management abandoned its duty to balance long-term results with societal responsibility. 2. The failure of the megastate. A lot of the blame directed at capitalism is actually frustration with the failure of modern government, which Drucker calls the megastate. In the 20th century, we shifted to the belief that the government should be the master of the economy and the solver of all social problems. However, the megastate has proven incredibly incompetent at actually doing things. Instead of effectively redistributing wealth or curing social ills, it has mutated into a pork barrel state. Politicians use the public purse to buy votes from special interest groups, handing out subsidies that serve no real public policy purpose. This legalized the looting of common wealth, undermines the foundation of representative government, and destroys civic pride. So, when people look around and see crumbling infrastructure, failing public schools, and severe economic inequality, they are largely witnessing the bankruptcy of the megastate, not a failure of free markets. 3. The new class conflict, knowledge versus service workers. Karl Marx predicted a fatal class war between the capitalists and the proletarians. But the productivity revolution of the 20th century defeated that by making manual workers affluent and middle class. However, Drucker warns that we are now facing a brand new, highly dangerous class conflict. In the post-capitalist society, knowledge is the only meaningful economic resource. If you are a knowledge worker, aka someone who applies formal education to their job, you have immense leverage, mobility, and earning power. But what about the service workers? These are the people who do the routine and often menial tasks, such as facility cleaners, delivery drivers, or retail clerks. They now make up a massive portion of the workforce, but their productivity is relatively low. Because people can only be paid in accordance to their productivity, the gap between the affluent knowledge workers and the struggling service workers is widening rapidly. Drucker warns that unless we figure out how to drastically increase the productivity and therefore the income and dignity of service workers, society will face severe social tensions. The housing and cost of living crisis we are currently experiencing is tied to this exact divide. If we focus all of our energy on blaming capitalism, we are essentially fighting a battle that ended decades ago. It leads to dead-end solutions like waiting for a Marxist revolution that history has already proven leads only to tyranny and misery. The path forward requires accurately diagnosing the current system. We have to demand long-term accountability from the investment funds that hold all of our money. We have to stop expecting the bloated megastate to solve all of our community problems and instead build up a strong, autonomous social sector of nonprofits where citizens can take direct responsibility. And most importantly, society must focus on raising the productivity of service work so that everyone can afford to live with dignity in the knowledge economy. Hear me out. I want to make this very clear. I am not saying that capitalism is innocent, but greedy managers ruined everything. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that the old capitalism versus socialism argument no longer explains where power resides. You see, modern society is governed through organizations. Managers exercise that power, but our institutions reward them for chasing short-term profits while neglecting the workers, the customers, the communities, and our future. The problem is not simply who owns the capital. It is whether those who direct our institutions understand their purpose, accept responsibility for their impacts, and can be held accountable for the full consequences of their decisions. So, what do you think? I know this is a controversial position to take, and I welcome your genuine arguments below. But please do me a favor and keep it civil. I read every single one, and I would love to respond respectfully. If this video helps you better understand what management is all about, please subscribe. This is exactly what this channel is here to do. And if you know somebody who's upset with capitalism, please share this video with them. I would love to hear their thoughts. As always, thank you so much for your time and attention. I'll see you next time.